I've been watching you for some time, and I really get a sense that like I need to be jumping more.
You do.
So let's tell our audience, because I guarantee you, 90% of people watching this don't think about jumping. Don't jump at all. So why should we jump?
Well, remember we were talking about the fluid dynamics that happen inside, the physics of it that happen inside of a bone. Well, one of the best ways to impact your bones is to jump. Now, I did a study so long ago, 2010 or something, where I looked at master's age athletes. So you have to be 50 and over to be a master's age athlete in competing in the National Senior Games. And I looked at who had the best bone density. Well, the first question I asked was, can we maintain our bone density late into our 80s? And the answer was yes. But then we had to go back and say, well, which activities? And it was all the jumping sports, volleyball, basketball, anywhere that you were jumping up and down, not so much swimming and cycling as you would expect, right? How much jumping do we actually need to do? Because probably not many people, to your point, jump anymore. Not because they're incapable, it's just they haven't, right?
They haven't had a reason to.
Why would they
There's
jump?
No more jumping jacks
Right, why would we? So, if we're walking, that exerts about 1.5 times body weight. If we're running, jogging, it's about 2.5. The science tells us that we need 3.5, 4 times body weight to cause the impact that will cause the osteoblast to build better bone, right? We can get that by jumping. So the recommendations are anywhere, depending on who you read, and there's several guidelines, but either 10 minutes of multi-directional jumping 3 times a week, or every single day jumping broken up in a couple sets 50 times a day. So 20 here, 20 there. It's better to do it multi-directionally, because if you do 50 in a row, the fluid dynamics will equalize and they won't stimulate the osteoblasts. But if you're jumping ahead and back and like hopscotch, I did a post recently where I was reintroducing hopscotch to the world, because think about it, you jump in a line and then you jump side to side. And so it doesn't have to be arduous. It can be fun. But there's a difference between jumping up and down the way I'm talking about now and jumping on a plyo box for type 2 muscle fibers. Because when I also demonstrate that online, I often get comments of, oh, I could never do a 24-inch box. Well, I'm actually not asking you to. Jumping up and down on the ground can take you a long way. And then even 8 inches, which is the height of an average step, will give you 4 times body weight.
What about wearing a weighted vest and going for a walk?
So you know why I love weighted vests? It is not for building bone. I love weighted vests because it will increase your workload about 10%. And I give it that number based on my own experience. When I wear a weighted vest to do my zone 2 or my baseline training on a treadmill, it increases my heart rate about 10% with the same incline and speed. So I think weighted vests are a great way to add workload to your walk or something. But it's not enough weight to really add impact to your bones. Now, there are some very small studies, as they tend to be. Weighted vest with weightlifting can have an impact on bone. But then we know weightlifting alone will have an impact on bone. So
is weightlifting enough? Do you have to jump? Or is weightlifting enough to get that 4X?
Weightlifting de novo has been found to be able to have a positive impact on bone density. But listen, why are we doing one or the other? Right? Let's just do all 8 things or 7 or 8 things and optimize our chances. Sometimes I keep referring to social media, but we are both very big and very active on social media. So I get all kinds of comments, and I get a lot of comments about, well, there is no randomized controlled trial that a vest plus jumping plus weights plus okay, so there is not a randomized study that tests all 4 things on bone density. It doesn't mean that we don't know individually these things can help, and that perhaps by stacking them, we can save people from the ravages of fracture. Because unless you have been at the bedside of a woman who is curled up in a ball, writhing in pain, has a 30% chance of dying, do not talk to me about your experience with a woman with a fracture, because you don't know.
Yeah, and there's no it's not like we're harming anybody
We
by
are
doing
not
these
harming
activities,
people.
right?
That's
Like
right.
jumping is not bad for you. Now, I will say a lot of women don't want to jump because of stress incontinence.
There is that. Let's fix that for them. Let's do something for that.
So please, see your urologist, your urogynecologist, go to pelvic floor physical therapy, do Kegels, figure out, there are so many things available. There are minimally invasive procedures, there are surgeries, but they're, really minimal surgeries. So talk to your doctor. Don't suffer in silence. Don't use that as an excuse.
Well, and I love that you're bringing that out, and it's so apropos because I just don't want women to feel like they're alone or have to be ashamed when that happens, because I don't know, tell me if these data are right, but I have in my mind 80% of women have some form of incontinence. And even the strongest women in the world, if you watch the Reebok CrossFit games, these are the strongest women in the world. And when they're box jumping with heavy weights, sometimes they're incontinent. So it's not because you are a failure.
Yeah.
It's a physical manifestation of a skeletal muscle not doing its job in the pelvis.
Right. And it's a skeletal muscle that we are often utilizing for walking, for standing on your feet all day, for coughing, for childbirth, for everything. And so it can get weak, right? And just like any other muscle. And we are not really taught about the pelvic floor early on, and we're not taught to give it the attention it deserves. And so don't feel bad about it.
That's right.
But you should not, this is the thing I will say for my female listeners is, we suffer in silence too long.
Yeah.
We're too busy taking care of our kids, taking care of our aging parents, taking care of our spouse, taking care of everybody else before we take care of ourselves. And I see it every day in my clinic where women have dealt with it for 20 years, 30 years. And so I would say if you're bothered, absolutely do something about it. If you're not bothered, it's not dangerous. But we're off the topic. But
it changes whole lifestyle. So let's address it. Yeah.
That's absolutely. So we talked about impact.
Yes.
Now pulling muscle tendon, so resistance training.
Yes.
Tell me about training mistakes that people make that can actually hurt their bone. Because I think everyone hopefully knows, if they've listened to my podcast, listened to you, that resistance training is important.
Yeah.
But when are they hurting themselves?
I think it is very common to hear a recommendation and think that everybody is going to start at the same place. I think you have to do an honest assessment of where you're starting. If you are literally an adult onset exerciser, meaning you never have done anything, but you've gotten the message now, it takes a ramp up, sometimes a year, to learn how your body moves, to build some reps so that your bones and tendons can bear the load, to learn the technique to lift in a proper way so that you're not going to hurt yourself, to not overdo it too much, too soon, too often. You can get a stress fracture from going from 0 to hyperintensity over a short amount of time. So if you're an adult onset exerciser, give yourself a runway. If you are a once upon a timer, which is those people who remember the athlete they were in high school or college 20 or 30 years ago, and think we're just going to go back and start where we left, again, give yourself the ramp up. Nobody says that you have to arrive tomorrow at a place where you're lifting heavy, jumping up and down, doing plyo boxes, doing a lot of reps. That is a slow, steady progression. It is not a 6-week program, because I want people to pivot their mindsets to, this is how I live for the rest of my life, not a 6-week program and I'll be done with it. That's not how our body works.
Yeah.
So just give yourself the grace to be progressive. You will get there with consistency.
And if you build that consistency, it will continue.
It will
if
continue.
you try to go hard and heavy, you'll likely burn out.
Well, what happens is, I see this, my office, but purposefully, I put my office in this gorgeous performance center. And my office has floor-to-ceiling windows that overlook a football field, an indoor football field. And what I see happening day after day, because it's the same people, bless their hearts, they're trying so hard. They're doing so many reps at moderate intensity. They're not getting enough recovery. It's not periodized, light workout one day, really intense the next day. They're hurt all the time. In my office every 3 weeks with another overuse injury, because our body needs recovery days. Our body needs light days and really heavy days. And so those are all the ways we can get hurt while we're just trying to do the right thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been talking to my husband about it, and we lift, and we've come to a point where we're like, we're not always going to failure. We're not always trying to push ourselves because we don't want to injure ourselves. Like the longevity of being able to continue going to the gym and lifting is so much more important to us than just making that day hit a PR or whatever it is. So how can people know? Because I think this is the other thing. People think no pain, no gain, right? So how can people know the difference between pain that's just physiologic adaptation versus pain that, hey, I need to slow down?
Adults, midlife people have delayed onset soreness. So it's the day after your workout, you might not be that sore, but 2 days later, you're very sore. And then it should go away by the time you cycle back to that. If it's a leg day and you get sore 3 or 4 days later, that soreness should be gone and you're pretty well recovered. If you're not, well, then give yourself the grace to do another body part that day if you're still so sore and inflamed. So that's one way to know. Also, there is a character difference between sharp, stabbing, ripping pain and fatigue and soreness. In all likelihood, intermittent, sharp, stabbing, ripping pain is actual damage. It will be accompanied by swelling and redness and heat. That is an injury and should be treated as such. Versus, I'm sore a few days after my workout. I lifted really hard. Well, maybe that's a sign that we need more recovery.
Yeah, absolutely. How can someone sort of pick up on the fact that they're overtraining? I mean, I see people all the time who say, I work out 7 days a week. I work out 6 days a week. And some of them are doing it with periodization. So they're having light days, but other times they are just like CrossFit every day, or they're really intensely working out. So how can someone identify like they're headed in that way?
It's important to listen to your body because there is a certain reward system to being that intense every day. The reality is pro athletes don't do the same intense workout every day. If we're all trying to emulate the best of us, right? They have light days, they have heavy days, they have very set schedules. So why do we think as mere mortal athletes doing the same high intensity, burn your brain out type thing is going to be helpful? Well, it feels good while we're doing it. But then when you start being more sore longer, if you start not being able to get your heart rate up to what you're used to, if your sleep becomes disturbed, if you're noticing that you're more susceptible to colds, then those are all signs that you're overtraining. Not to mention, maybe you have a nagging ache and pain that's just not going away because you're doing the same thing every day, abusing the same muscle groups, right? And that is really important to realize. And I'm not picking on cyclists, but if you're a cyclist and that is the only thing you do and you're doing the same intense uphill, downhill, because somebody's yelling you at the other side of the screen to do it, and you're fatigued and heavy and you have pains that won't go away, your body is speaking to you about the fact that it needs more recovery. And when you look at older professional athletes, I mean, like Lindsey Vonn just won a world championship at 41. Dara Torres came back to the Olympics twice in her 40s. A variety of hockey players. Tom Brady. We're performing athletes into their 40s now when we never were before.
Right.
But they do not train in the same way that they did when they were 20. When Dara Torres came back to the Olympics as a swimmer in her 40s, she was not swimming the same high intensity number of laps she did when she was younger. She had more recovery. She had more total body days. I mean, she's very open about talking about it. So why would we think as mere mortal midlife athletes that we could just go hard and intense every day?
Yeah. And there's not a benefit to it. I don't think you're going to be seeing a long-term benefit in terms of health by doing it every single day.
Right. And especially those high intensity every day tend to be all aerobic exercise.
Yeah.
To the detriment of lifting weights, which we know really if cardiac is important, but for preventing frailty, it's the strength training that will get us there.
If you guys like that clip with Dr. Vonda Wright, make sure to check out the full episode right here.